Washicho ahishni toka. Dakota oyate dokechi ihidaka
Before the
muti.
whites came here, the Dakota people moved around however they wanted. Of course, we followed the buffalo and would camp there. And then, too, Dakota would use everything that grew on the earth and respected it.
Il y a quelque chose de magique dans la prairie.
There is something magical about the prairies. The fresh breeze that springs up, the sweet grass everywhere, the blue of the sky, all combine to free one's spirit.
French mapmaker Joseph Nicolet was not the first European to travel to the American prairies, but he was the first to arrive with the heart of a philosopher. Nicolet fell in love with the land and the people. The accurate and beautiful map that he made of the region is one of the most important contributions to American geography. It is the map upon which all maps of the West would depend. Ironically, it undoubtedly hastened the settlement that forever transformed the Dakota way of life.
The whites came to the Dakota land carrying a lot of papers for treaties. They built trading posts and forts. The French came first, wanting to trade with the Dakota. These whites married Dakota, and so as a result, trade increased. It was in this way that Dakota life was changed.
Joseph Nicolet was born in 1786 in a mountain village in France. He rose to prominence as an astronomer, but his promising career was cut short by professional jealousies and the Revolution of 1830. In financial ruin, he left Paris without a word to his family or friends. A child of the French Alps, he would find his destiny on the American prairies. When Nicolet arrived in America in 1832, Lewis and Clark's travels had heightened interest in the West, but the government still lacked an accurate map of the region. Nicolet could determine exact geographical locations using astronomical measurements and specialized instruments, but even his scientific imagination could not prepare him for the immense challenges and distances that were to confront him on the Great Plains. Nicolet led a private expedition to the headwaters of the Mississippi in 1836, where he mapped the river's source. The U.S. War Department agreed to finance 2 expeditions to map the triangle of land between the Mississippi and Missouri rivers. Nicolet was particularly interested in the waterways and the Coteau de Prairie, a prominent ridge that rose 800 feet over the surrounding plains. Nicolet was warned that the region was an utter desert, and he heard tales of Indians along the Missouri driven to desperation by the spreading smallpox epidemic. Good guides and crew members were proving hard to find, and Nicolet's own health also posed risks. He had contracted malaria years earlier, but nothing would dampen Nicolet's determination. With his mission approved, he traveled up the Mississippi to the U.S. government's farthest outpost. Fort Snelling stood at the confluence of the Mississippi and Minnesota rivers, the easternmost corner of the Great Plains, home to the Dakota, native people of the prairies. Nicolet declined military escort. He wanted to convey to anyone he met that he had come in peace. In early June, Nicolet set out to map a region that was almost unknown geographically, traveling up the Minnesota River towards the mysterious Coteau and the land of the Dakota Indians.
Dakota oyate Sisseton.
The Dakota Nation, the Sisseton, Wahpeton, Bedewakantu, and Wakbekute camped along the waterways. They shared the hunting area with the Yankton and the Lakota.
For many days, the party encountered nothing but undulating prairie. the landscape began to work its magic on Nicolet.
En voyageant sur cette belle
Traveling on this beautiful prairie, we lose a good half hour in looking through the telescope at the crest of a hill on which our men believe they have distinguished something moving. The beautiful weather continues. The wind is always blowing.
Soon, they began to see traces of Indian camps.
My heart felt as if it would break when I found on the summit of a little hill a spoon and a blanket, signs of a dying person, abandoned to save the living who are decimated by famine. We finally arrive in the valley of the famous Red Stone, which is sought after by all the tribes of the north. It lies within the territory of the Sisseton.
Pipestone was given to the Dakota people. Before they would dig the pipestone, they would pray and purify themselves, for the spirit of thunder sees everyone who goes there.
We were not 1/2 mile from the Valley of Thunder when lightning and heavy rain burst upon us. The sun soon reappeared. We passed the rest of the day treading on the sacred grass and contemplating the red hues of the rock assembled like the ancient ruins of a city. One of our crew was tranquilly engraving his name on the summit of a rock when an Indian came up to touch his shoulder and ask what he was doing there. They were acquainted with each other. 2 other families appeared.
Nicolet invited them to share a dinner of freshly killed duck. Nicolet sat with the chiefs, and in a grandfatherly fashion he waited upon the women who held back from the feast with empty plates.
Our Indians left us this morning, pleased with us and we with them. Nothing equals the reserve and discretion of these good people, and once they know who you are, what you are doing, and that you treat them well, it takes so little to make them your friends. I cannot conceive why so many whites blunder in their dealings with them.
Nicolet spent long hours listening to Dakota elders. He quickly realized that the Dakota named places for an event or for some practical aspect of the land. He entered the Indian names in his notebook.
Scatterwood Lake, where one could collect firewood. Turtle River.
Water slightly troubled, a little whitish, without transparency in the water. This the Sioux express as Minnesota.
Nicolet's map is full of events. Médaille Iendon in Dakota, Lac qui parle in French, or in English, the lake that talks. Indian tradition holds that the lake received its name after an old man dreamed that the lake spoke with him one night. It was at Lac qui parle that Nicolet met Renville. Joseph Renville had occupied the post of the American Fur Company at Lac qui parle for 12 years. He had lived among the Dakota most of his life and was fluent in French, English, and Dakota. Renville provided not only hospitality, but official protection to travelers. Later, while camping with the Sisseton tribe near Round Lake, Nicolet received his Indian name.
You have spirit, the 2 chiefs told me. You are not proud. You treat us as equals, while the others have us eat beside the poor whom they scorn. And the name they gave me was Wakchon Wakon, the philosopher.
The expedition traveled as far north as Devil's Lake. Nicolet arrived during the heat of midsummer.
We are very sad in our camp, and I don't know why. The country is deserted. No living human, friend or enemy, has left any trace of their presence in this region.
Nicolet carefully mapped the lake and concluded that it had no outlet, correcting earlier rough maps of the region. He also reflected on the area's farming potential.
The excellent soil and healthful climate would assure success, but it is not thus that we ordinarily proceed in the beginning. Destruction is unhappily too often the prelude to settlement.
The party turned southeast on the last leg of the journey that would take them, finally, to the goal of the trip, the summit of the Coteau de Prairie.
We climb the slope of the Coteau des Prairies and find ourselves in the midst of an immense plateau, before a vast and magnificent valley, spreading to the horizon. I pity anyone whose soul could remain unmoved under such a scene.
This prominent ridge defined the region's watershed. Waterways flowing north reach the Red River and Hudson Bay, and waterways flowing south reach the Mississippi and finally the Gulf of Mexico. Late in August, the party headed for Fort Snelling, their mission accomplished. Nicolet spent 2 final days in the West with Renville to finish up his notes because he feared civilization might interfere with his thoughts. When Nicolet arrived in Washington, D.C. in early January, he set about to create his masterwork. Nicolet insisted that the map include hatchering marks. Maps revealing the height of land were a revolutionary concept. Finally, in 1843, the map was published in a form that would have been acceptable to Nicolet. But the map maker never saw the finished map. Nicolet died in the fall of 1843. He left few possessions and was buried in a grave without a marker. But his map lives on. Perhaps his greatest gift in his maps and records is the way he saw the country. He saw it as the Indians saw it, and he was the last of his kind who was able to communicate such an experience to us.
L'homme des prairies ne foule que le gazon only on grass and flowers. They hunt only the most active animals and breathe pure air and see nothing around them to thwart their desires. They are gay and proud and believe themselves master of the earth. They are free. Indians, with their private morals, the laws of their families, their customs, and the moving language they speak, they are the heroes here. On sent des héros.